From Florence, Italy, the city of inspiration for sculptors in ages past and for centuries to come, you're listening to The Sculptor's Funeral. Good day to you all, and welcome to The Sculptor's Funeral. I'm your host, Jason Arkles, a sculptor living and working in Florence, where all the great sculptors are dead, and I don't feel so well myself. Today on The Sculptor's Funeral, we're going to hear two interviews that I did on my trip to England in April 2015. I've been wanting to include interviews as a component to the Sculptor's Funeral podcast since its inception. I want to have conversations with the best contemporary figurative sculptors working today, many of which are working in areas of sculpture that I don't think get enough attention. This is largely because, well, the contemporary atelier curriculum focuses on study of the nude figure and perhaps portraiture, and because of this, I think sculpture students tend to pigeonhole themselves into thinking that the first step after their education should be to create small-scale, saleable bronze nudes, and then get some gallery representation or mount an exhibition. These are the most common roads to a career in sculpture, but there are many other paths. And I want to highlight those sculptors who are finding success in less common areas of representational sculpture. Often, it's personal experience and personal interest that motivates a sculptor to pursue the road less traveled. My first interviews are with sculptors who are doing just that. My first guest, Charlie Langton, is recognized as one of the best equine sculptors working. More than simply a sculptor of horses, Charlie Langton's work focuses on champion thoroughbreds, a subject with which he has been familiar with and entranced by all his life. His recent work includes an over-life-sized equine portrait statue of the champion Yates, which is permanently installed in the Winner's Circle at Ascot Racecourse in England. And he also collaborated with the sculptor Mark Jackson on the Parachute Regiment and Airborne Forces Memorial in the UK. Charlie Langton and Mark Jackson are not just professional collaborators, but old friends and schoolmates, having studied alongside one another at the Charles H. Cecil Studio in Florence, which is where I got to know both of them as well. Now the two have adjoining studios in the Wiltshire countryside, just outside the city of Marlborough, and that's where I was able to catch up with them. The weather was fantastic for early April in England, and after a tour of Charlie's studio, we sat down for a cup of tea and a chat in the studio kitchen. But you come from a horsey family. You have a horse background, right?
Yeah. There's a connection there. My great uncle used to breed racehorses, and my mum used to do it on quite a small scale as well. So I've grown up with horses around, and it's always been, racing's always been a sport that I've loved, and horses have always been sort of in my background basically, and they've been a sort of natural subject for me.
Have you ever actually bred horses yourself?
No.
Okay.
No.
So,
one day I'd like to, but you need a lot of cash for that.
Right.
Sell a few bronzes first, but.
Well, at what point did you decide to? Because you went to art school.
Yeah.
Did you go anywhere before you went to Charles Cecil?
I did. I did a year at Edinburgh College of Art, and I didn't really get on with it that well. I didn't really find there was any sort of structured teaching there, because I'd gone to a brilliant school here just outside Oxford, Radley College, and they had a fantastic art department there where I sculpted and painted and did ceramics and things, and it was the most amazing art department. So I ended up getting an art travel scholarship from the school, which enabled me to go to Florence for a month initially, and that's when I first went to Charles Cecil.
Oh, right. So you're only there for like a summer course
exactly.
at first, and then enrolled full time after.
Yeah. So I did the month course, and then went to Edinburgh and did a year. And sort of as soon as I'd had that month in Florence, I kind of knew that was immediately what I wanted to do. But I'd already committed myself to the year in Edinburgh, so I kind of just went with it, and just to see what would come out of it, basically.
Did you know at that time? You said you figured out that's what you wanted to do. Charles Cecil Studio is not exactly known as an equestrian sculptor's place of education. Were you at that time still thinking, sort of along the lines of portraiture and in fact actually painting portraiture, or was it always sculpture?
Well, no, it wasn't. It wasn't always sculpture. Like, I tried sculpture at school and loved it, but I'd been sort of drawing and painting for a long time before that, and I always knew that I wanted to ultimately end up, sculpting horses and.
Oh, really? So that was always an ultimate goal.
That was always
okay.
like what I really, really wanted to do. It was just a question of sort of figuring out how to get there, basically. And when it was sort of more of a sort of pipe dream before I'd been to Charles Cecil and seen, this way of approaching work. I didn't think it was something that was sort of attainable. I didn't know there was the sort of teaching, the sort of groundwork that would enable me to make a successful career out of it. So the portraiture side, which I was learning at Charles Cecil, I sort of applied to horses. Right.
Now, I know nothing about how to sculpt horses. So how different is it, your approach to equestrian sculpture as opposed to other equestrian sculptors? I mean, are they much more, kind of just like in the figure, are they much more maybe anatomically based or constructively based, working from canons of proportion, or?
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, the way I work is a lot of measurements initially. Mm-hmm. I mean, horses are as different as we are, and looks and proportions and whatever. So I take a lot of measurements initially, and then I use all the observational teaching that I was taught at Charles Cecil, basically, right, in the same ethos, but just applied to horses. So it's not sight size as such, but it's just the observational work. So I do as much from life as possible,
right? Especially
in the early stages.
Can you describe how that process is? Because I think it's fascinating in terms of the special considerations and of your studio, how it works. Can you describe your studio a little bit for me?
Well, the studio's not exactly how I want it at the moment, but it will develop into having a stable in the corner. I'm going to extend it out to the side, and there's a paddock sort of adjoining it. So
right, and there's like
ideally I'd like to have a life model there.
Right, and you just have this basically a large barn door.
Yeah.
Right into your studio.
Yeah, exactly.
From the paddock.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
So you can actually board your sitters.
Yeah, potentially. Although there's a slight insurance problem with it. So
right, with racehorses, sure. Yeah.
I do a lot of travelling. So I go to Ireland. I've just got back from Australia, and I love that. That it takes me to these places. It's amazing, really, beyond what I ever thought it would be. So I take all my kit to the yard, and try not to get in the way of everything that goes on in a busy working yard. And I make a maquette. Basically, I do a quarter life size or a 6 life size study over a course of a week, with all the measurements, and that is my sketch. That's all the information I need to make. The big one is in that maquette. So make it as detailed as I possibly can, and then bring it back to the studio and start working from that.
When you started working seriously as an animalier, as an equestrian sculptor, did you look to contemporary examples more, or to historical animaliers, people who had been working with horses? How much of a historical grounding did you take, or was it as we were taught at Charles Cecil, basically taking our primary information from our visual senses, filtered, our optical input filtered through our brains? Or did you consciously try to develop a style that had any sort of relation to a historical context in terms of how other equestrian sculptors had worked? Or
not so much equestrian sculptures, really. I mean, initially just using the grounding that I had from Charles Cecil, really, and from you, in terms of how to approach that kind of work, observational work. But then I started looking at Rembrandt Bugatti and his very subtle observational stuff, and I love the way he just you can just capture something very intimate in an animal. It doesn't have to be a sort of really flamboyant pose or anything. It's just really pure natural observation, which sets his work apart from many others, I think. So I started looking at his.
I've never heard of Rembrandt Bugatti.
Yeah.
What time did he work?
He died age 31, just after the Second World War, I think it was. Tragically committed suicide, age 31.
Age 31?
Yeah.
Wow, so his career obviously was short.
Yeah, very short
but
and
very
incredible.
And he was mostly an equestrian? Or?
No, just animals. He sort of based most of his work around the animals at Antwerp Zoo, which was bombed during the war, and he was so devastated by all the animals being killed that he committed suicide.
Wow, fascinating.
He spent all his time working at Antwerp Zoo, and famously sort of became very, attached to antelope, which he actually took back to his studio and lived with for months while he made 2 life-size bronzes of them.
Wow, and this was during the war.
Yeah,
I assume, because if there wasn't a war, he probably wouldn't have been allowed to take 2 antelope from the zoo.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating.
An amazing sculptor, and even in such a short career, to have sort of achieved, the kind of work he was achieving, age 31, was quite incredible. To think what he would have gone on to do. Yeah.
Now, but it's more than his style. It was rather his approach or what he was seeking out in the animals that.
Yeah, it was just a very sort of pure observational connection which he had, and that's something that you can only have by spending time with your subjects. So that's something that I try and emulate if possible.
Does that set you apart a little bit from other equestrian sculptors working today?
I don't know how other contemporaries of mine sort of work really, but
because from what I've seen, from the press that you've got, you seem to be recognized as something a little bit different. And maybe I've seen you referred to as that you're like the golden boy of equestrian.
I'm not sure where that came from, but I don't know. It just seems it's just a natural progression from the way I was taught to work in this way, and it's not something that I've gone out of my way to do. It's just it just sort of seems to work, and I'd love to do it more, but just the scale of the work that I'm doing means that I have to remove myself from the subject at some point. But as much as I can do from life, I do, and it's massively beneficial. I don't understand how you can do it any other way, really. So.
I've posted some images of the work of Charlie Langton at the website, thesculptorsfuneral.com. To see even more and to read about Charlie's career, go to his website, www.charlielangtonart.com, all one word. We'll hear more from Charlie Langton about the special considerations that are involved with sculpting a portrait of a racehorse from life when the Sculptor's Funeral continues. Hey, sculptors in the UK. Have you ever dreamed about taking time off to study marble carving in a place like Pietrasanta or Carrara, Italy? Well, the logistics of that can be quite daunting. Finding accommodations, finding instruction in English, finding the time, and of course, finding the money. Just a small basic collection of personal carving tools and equipment can easily cost £1,000. Well, I got good news. I'm putting together a workshop this summer that will bring Italy to the British Isles. I'm calling it the Wiltshire Workshop, and it's happening this August from the 10th to the 22nd. Join me in a 2-week class for beginning marble carvers in the green countryside of Wiltshire, just outside of Marlborough, where you'll learn everything you need to know in order to carve a figurative work in marble. In addition to learning the basics with hand tools and machine tools, you will learn the process of using a macchinetta a punto, or pointing machine, the simple device which for centuries has allowed sculptors to make exact copies of plaster casts in marble. And that's exactly what you'll do. Choose from a selection of plaster casts taken from the work of master sculptors in the past, Bernini, Houdon, Michelangelo, Donatello, and create your very own true and faithful copy to keep. Not many people can claim to own their own marble copy of the face of Bernini's St. Teresa or Michelangelo's Dying Captive, but now you can be one of them. Now, being mindful of both schedule and cost constraints, the course is just 2 weeks long. Just enough time to produce a copy of a portrait mask or a hand study, a foot study, or maybe even a small torso. All tools and materials are provided, so there's no need to purchase a bunch of tools just to get started. It's all coming up with me from Italy, including some beautiful Carrara marble. And if you are looking to save on accommodations, there's even the option to camp under the stars in the Wiltshire countryside for no extra charge. All the information for the Wiltshire Workshop, which starts August 10th, can be found at our website, thesculptorsfuneral.com. Now, there's only space for 12 participants in this workshop, and the sign-up deadline is July 1st. But I have a feeling the course will fill up early. So sign up today at thesculptorsfuneral.com, and I'll see you in Wiltshire. My guest is Charlie Langton, the rising star of equine sculpture in the UK. Personally, as a sculptor who has never attempted to work with horses, I was very curious to know just how different the process is from working with human models. I put the question to Charlie in the past, and I always got the same answer, that it's the same as with people, just with horses. I've always been slightly incredulous of this, and I got Charlie to talk a little about both the similarities and differences between working with humans and with horses.
Horses. I saw you keep on saying it's just like, what you do with people, basically, only with horses. But the thing is, you can tell a sitter to sit still or turn their head slightly. And of course, it's sculpture. It's not painting. You're not capturing a still image, so it's okay if your sitter moves a little bit, and
sure,
sometimes can even be helpful. But I have to imagine it's kind of almost like working with sculpting children or something, where you can't actually get them to do what they want to do all the time. Or am I wrong? I mean, are racehorses so well trained and so responsive to command that you're actually able to work with them more than you would think? Or
no,
what's the experience?
Sadly, not. So a lot of it basically is based on anatomy. So if I'm doing for a galloping pose, there you obviously can't, get a horse to like freeze.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, put one leg up and yeah.
So it's I basically I'll start with I started by learning as much as I could about anatomy of the horse, and that's my starting point basically. So I know pretty much roughly where all the muscles, the muscle masses are going to be for whatever pose I want to have the horse in.
Mm-hmm.
And the pose of the horse is dictated by what type of character the horse is. So, an intelligent horse you'd probably have standing still, ears pricked, sort of, neck quite up and head looking out. Whereas, sort of highly strung horse, you'd have maybe one hoof off the ground or trotting or.
Oh, really interesting.
Yeah, so it's the only way you can get really the character of the individual horse across is by getting to know it and sort of seeing what type of horse it is, and you can only do that by being around it for at least a couple of days.
I had never thought of that. I figured, okay, obviously facial expression or whatever, expression of an attitude or character of a horse.
Yeah.
I never considered, elements like, showing what a horse looks like when he's high strung. The particular pose that they would take. That's really interesting. I didn't.
Yeah, there's not much you can. There aren't really. A horse's eye is very expressive, and the ears obviously. But other than that, in the head, there's not much you can. There's not much you can really do with it. You can sort of flare a nostril to see, to make it look a bit more.
And at the same time, though, you're trying to catch a portrait of a particular horse.
Yeah, exactly.
Quite often.
Yeah.
Now, what are the things that change? Obviously, it's going to be very, very precise, sort of sizes and relations of different features in the face. Yeah. But and I assume that extends, to the entire body of the animal.
Yeah.
But what are the sort of key features that change from subject to subject? For instance, are horses' ears very unique, one against another? Or is there something that changes more?
Well, the thing that sort of interests me, and it's sort of crossover between my sort of love of sculpting and love of racing, is that there's the bloodlines in racing are really important, and the people that are commissioning these sculptures generally speaking, are very clued up on their bloodlines. So it's important for them that the horse matches, its descendants basically. So some bloodlines will have a wide forehead, and it's important to get that in. Some will have a narrow one, and the stallions will sort of, breed that through into their progeny. So it's really important that, from the client's point of view, especially, that you do know what you're doing, and it is, an accurate portrait, because otherwise, it's not a good reflection of the stallion. And these stallions are, they're worth a lot of money to these people, and it's big business for them. So at the end of the day, it's a bit of a publicity stunt for their stallion. So it's got to represent it in an accurate and, good way. Yeah.
Wow. I went to your website and I read some of the stuff you wrote on it, and I found a really interesting quote, and I'm wondering if I could, if I could ask you a question about it. Yeah, so you say, it is in searching for and this is a quote, it is in searching for the components that make a champion that I find myself drawn into each subject with a fresh excitement. Every champion horse has something unique, or more likely, a unique combination of attributes that will set it apart from the herd. It is in the process of trying to establish what these are and attempting to capture them that I find so alluring. So, and then you go on, it says, my ambition with every work is to sculpt the character, the presence, the movement, and the likeness of the horse, so that fleeting spark of excitement, passion, and beauty can endure. And my question, I guess, is how recognizable is the quality of a champion thoroughbred as compared to, I guess, a middling thoroughbred, or one, that isn't a grand champion, when you're just comparing literally just the physical, not their performance, obviously, but just how they look. Are there really sort of telltale signs of a true champion? What are those?
Well,
and you're talking to a guy that, like, I don't know one horse breed from another. I don't know, like, when I can't tell a Ford truck from a Chevy truck, right? So what are the things that are the big clues?
This is one of the most sort of interesting things about the whole racing industry, is that there's that sort of dream quality, that is so elusive. You can buy essentially what you think is the perfect horse conformation in it. Everything on it's perfect. Legs are, immaculately straight, and it's got beautiful shape. But it could be a complete disaster on the racetrack, and you can get something that, doesn't necessarily look anything special, but can be an absolute world beater. So it's a complete lottery, really. Right.
So in that sense, it really is. It has to be entirely dependent on the portrait of the particular horse, because if there's a champion that doesn't physically look like the champion, you don't want to come up with your stock set of features for a champion horse and apply it to that, because they're not going to fit.
Yeah, exactly.
Be a portrait.
Yeah. There is such a unique set of attributes with every racehorse that would set it apart. For some, it's it's their character. They've got a very good temperament, and they like to be sort of at the front of the herd all the time. They've just got that sort of temperament. For others, it's maybe a slightly longer shoulder or a bigger rib cage to hold a bigger heart and bigger set of lungs. Generally speaking, a horse needs a deep rib cage to house a good engine. Basically, that is one attribute that is pretty much set. A horse does need that. It also need big nostrils,
right?
To let a large amount of air in.
Yeah. Wow.
But other than that, there is sort of essential angles in the shoulder, the way the shoulder comes down and meets the forearm. That's fairly key. But so much of it is based on character and sort of minute differences. There's no sort of, I haven't found it yet. Maybe there is like this formula.
Well, in 2011, you sculpted an over life-size portrait statue of the champion racehorse Yates. And it's placed at the Winner's Circle, is that right? At Ascot Downs?
Yeah, Ascot Racecourse, yeah.
Yeah, Ascot Racecourse, yeah. And it was unveiled by the Queen. Saw amazing pictures online. It's a beautiful, beautiful sculpture.
Thank you.
I think it's got a real grace to it that, I guess it's probably because I live in Florence, and you get, every time you see a horse, it's not a racehorse, it's a war horse with, holding a general on top, or, someone in sort of heavy plate armor. And it feels fast just looking at it. It's really good work. I like it a lot.
Thank you very much.
But I don't think I've actually ever seen a horse also in precisely that pose, right? Was the pose, if I remember correctly, it's something in the forelegs. It's a bit of a...
Yeah, he's walking, and he's got sort of front leg extended, and his neck's arched, his head's down, and that was I'd seen him race at Ascot several times, and it was actually something that he's a very striking horse anyway. He's very dark and beautiful shape to it, but the way he walked was a real sort of distinctive thing about him, and I was quite lucky in a way that I had that for him, because it was my first sort of big portrait on that scale anyway, and I was really lucky that he did have such a distinctive walk. He always carried his head in that way and was pretty much instantly recognizable because of that. So it was quite an easy one to pick up on, and it was just an obvious choice to have him in that pose. Really.
Right. No, it's really characteristic. I mean, I think I would probably recognize him.
That'd be nice.
Yeah, that's really cool. So you were saying that was your first large scale horse?
Yeah.
And before that, you had been doing smaller scale works.
Yeah.
Mostly on what, like the 1/6 size you were saying, sort of tabletop.
Yeah, anything from a 1/6 to a quarter, really. I tried a third before, but yeah, this was by far and away the biggest.
Right. Now, did the trophy for the Epsom Derby? The Epsom Derby. Did that come before?
Yeah, that came just before.
Yeah, that is also a fantastic piece. Could you describe it for our audience?
It's a circular. It's a circular trophy with 3 silver horses running around the top of it, and it's inspired by Epsom Racecourse itself, because it's a very unique racecourse where it starts very high, and there's a very sharp corner called Tattenham Corner, which is what sets the Derby apart from most other races, is the uniqueness of the course. So I based the design around that course. So you got three silver horses running around silver turf, and then in the centre of it, there's all the past winners, dating back to 1780, I think it is. I'll have to check that. 1781, I think.
We'll edit that out if it's wrong.
And then it's all mounted on a Macassar ebony base.
Right, it's beautiful, and it's given out every year. It's the prize of the Derby.
It's now the perpetual trophy.
That's fantastic. That's a really cool thing to have.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, and it's cast in silver, right?
Yep.
Now, okay, here's a question. Technically, all right. Now, when you were, I assume you've got founders making the molds for your large scale stuff.
Yep.
But I also assume that at least at the first, you were probably doing the molds for your smaller scale ones yourself, or
I never had, actually.
Oh no, okay.
No, I never.
Well, because my question is how you cast a 4-legged creature like that. Do you? I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with your molds.
Yeah.
Is it common to have to cut off a few like limbs or?
No, you normally cut the tail off. And maybe the ears, but the legs are molded as it's all molded as one piece essentially. You don't have to cut anything off, but it would be just divided, so the legs would be divided on the actual piece itself. So the molds are separate,
right,
for the legs and the head.
Oh, okay.
And the tail, but it's all molded as one piece, if you see what I mean.
Right. Okay. So you're taking molds off of each individual leg rather than trying to make a mold that has the legs integral with the body.
Yeah.
Belly. Oh,
yeah,
cool.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what's next? What's next on the agenda? Do you have anything big coming up, or?
Yeah, I've just got back from Australia. Spent 2 weeks out there, doing my usual sort of getting to know the horse kind of thing. And I've made 2 maquettes, a 6 life size and a 3rd life size head, which is being moulded in Australia at the moment and then being shipped back next week. And I'll be making a start on that as soon as they arrive. And I need to get that finished by sort of mid-June, the sculpting part anyway. So I'll be flat out on that. And then the bronze cast will be delivered end of August, hopefully.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Wow, shipped out by the end of August, not delivered to Australia by the end of August.
Yeah, that's
the plan?
Yeah.
Wow, I shipped a marble piece from Italy to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And it took 2 months.
Did it?
Yeah.
Oh God.
Oh god.
Well, they have.
Maybe if they fly
I might be
over.
able to. Yeah, these stallions sort of shuttle back between Ireland and Australia,
Ah, okay.
so I might be able to fit it on the plane next to one of them. Yeah, busy.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you do any other work besides equestrians? Do you ever do portraits, for instance, or figures? Or actually, do you paint as well? Because you're a trained painter as well.
Yeah, I haven't painted for about 2 years now, but I do it. I do want to get back to doing it at some point, but it's one of those things you need to keep your hand in with. So I'd need to give it a good run before I attempted doing anything properly, I think.
Right.
I do the odd portrait bust now and again, but
Of humans.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, Charlie Langton, thank you very much for coming on the Sculptor's Funeral. I really appreciate it. And
it's a great
yeah,
honor
and
to be on there.
Thanks for having me over to your studio as well. It is absolutely beautiful outside of Marlborough in Wiltshire. I think I've pronounced both of those fairly correctly.
Just about.
Well, I didn't say Marlborough. For the Americans in the audience, I'm in Marlborough, but for the English, I'm in Marlborough.
That's right.
Excellent. Well, great. Thanks a lot again for
Thanks a lot, Jason.
talking
Great to
to
see
me.
you.
After my interview with Charlie Langton, Mark Jackson sat down with us in the studio kitchen their adjoining studios share, and the three of us talked about their collaboration on the Parachute Regiment and Airborne Forces Memorial. This is a national memorial which was commissioned to celebrate the regiment's 70th anniversary. The memorial is a sculpted recreation of the Parachute Regiment's emblem, which is of the mythical winged horse Pegasus, with his rider, the Greek hero Bellerophon, hurling a spear. Below this amazing equestrian group, off the pedestal but still a part of the memorial, stands a bronze figure of a paratrooper depicted after landing from a jump. It's an extraordinary commission, and I wanted to talk to both Charlie and Mark about their process of collaboration, the challenges inherent to such a large work, and the solutions they came up with to those challenges.
So I'm here with Mark Jackson and Charlie Langton. And could you please explain to me the rather unique commission that you both received together and worked on in 2010?
Yeah, of course. Shall I go?
Away.
Well, see, Charlie and I met while we were studying under your good self out in Florence. And he took us through the first and important steps in our sculpture training. And we remained good friends thereafter and kept in touch. And some years after that, I think it was 2009 when we first heard, we were approached to pitch in for a large memorial, which is for a military organisation which I served with in a previous life. And it was the National Memorial for the Parachute Regiment and Airborne Forces, to be installed in a fantastic site in sort of Middle England called the National Memorial Arboretum. Which was a site which opened about 20 years ago with dense planting of trees with the view to thinning them out and creating an arboretum parkland setting in which would be installed not only the main national monument to the services and people who have fallen in their duty, but also for other organisations individually to put in their monument. So we got the opportunity to pitch. I heard about it first. One of the significant, iconic emblems for Airborne Forces going back to the Second World War is Pegasus. They adopted it as an obvious symbol from mythology for Airborne Forces to adopt. And as soon as I knew that would be part of the memorial, in the first instance, I asked Charlie if he'd like to come in on the commission so we could pitch together, with obviously his great sculpting skills with equestrian work. And we put the pitch in and won the commission, which was fantastic. And there ensued a 2-year project. It was 2 years in the making.
All right. Now, okay, so you basically worked together and pitched an idea and actually won the commission for basically an over-life-size equestrian statue. Can you describe it a little bit more clearly in terms of the actual composition?
Well, the brief was pretty strict in the sense that it had to accurately depict the cat badge.
Right, so it had to resemble the emblem.
Yeah, exactly.
What would you call that? A logo or no emblem?
badge.
Badge. Okay, it's like a patch you would have on
Sure,
the arm
exactly.
of the uniform of the Airborne.
Yeah. So that was, it was Pegasus taking off with Bellerophon on the back.
And I'm sorry, who can you explain who Bellerophon is?
Yeah, Bellerophon tamed Pegasus, who was a wild winged horse, with a golden bridle, I believe. Mm-hmm. And Bellerophon's task was to defeat Chimera, which we obviously use now as a sort of catch-all character for sort of evil or a monster. And Bellerophon could not. He knew he couldn't defeat Chimera on his own, so he tamed Pegasus, and together they sort of hunted down and defeated Chimera.
Right. So basically, it's an over life-size winged horse with a rider, rearing up on two legs, or really, it's not more. It's more than rearing up. It's sort of launching into the air.
Yeah.
Right. It's not just making a jump. He's about to take flight, and so
that was quite a key.
You mentioned that both of you had studied at the Charles H. Cecil Studios under my watch when I was a sculpture teacher there. So let me ask you: were you somewhat unprepared to sculpt a life-size equestrian statue just based on your training at Charles Cecil, or were you completely unprepared to do such a thing? Because obviously, it's awesome that you did it, and obviously, looking at the work, totally had the skills. But how big of a learning curve was it to go from modeling in clay, figure studies from life, in sort of still poses, into doing something as large and technically challenging as what you guys did?
Well, we were given the confidence ourselves. I think that we could go for it. I mean, we knew it would be a challenge, and that was a lot of the attraction, actually, especially for Charlie to achieve a sensation of flight with Pegasus, and that involved more than we knew when we took it on. An incredible amount of engineering, which we had to get external help for. But at the time when we pitched, we had just essentially either completed, or I think you'd already started the exam. But we had individually done our first over life size horse in Charlie's case and figure in my case. So we'd already had the sort of teething problems of working on that scale. Mm-hmm. So we knew we could. I mean, this particular commission brought its own challenges, but we'd each taken that sort of first step. So we had done a big piece each.
Right. You were out of school by just a few years at this point, both of you, right? Yeah. Wow. What do you think was the biggest surprise, I guess? Because obviously before you start this sort of thing, you do as much planning as possible and try to foresee the challenges ahead. But was there anything that really sort of like took you by surprise? Maybe the armature or certain things that you'd have to change, in terms of your practice to be able to get this done?
Well, the armature work was it took a lot of thinking about.
Yeah, because as well as the internal armature, actually what Charlie ended up creating was essentially a sort of a metal framed box around Pegasus, out to the margins of Pegasus, nose to tail and hoof to wingtip, so that actually there were external supports like a back stand, but quite a few of them, certainly to bear the weight.
Sure, of the wings.
Of the wings.
Yeah.
You see the height of the ceiling here. We're in a 2.5-story building. Actually, the wingtips of Pegasus were pretty much brushing the ceiling.
Yeah. And for those listening, if you go to the website, thesculptorsfuneral.com, you can see a couple pictures of Pegasus and Bellerophon, so you can get a sense of the scale and the complexity of this work. It's something everyone needs to look at. It's pretty amazing.
But on top of that, as well as the armature, I think it's fair to say, I mean, for both of us, we had the challenge of working on what would be essentially the same piece of bronze. Pegasus and Bellerophon is the same piece of bronze, but had two artists working on it, which I think is fairly rare. And Pegasus was actually sculpted first, and I consciously, to make it as homogeneous as possible, almost sort of sculpted as far as I could in the style of the sort of handling that Charlie had used for Pegasus, even down to using tools which I wouldn't normally use. But
interesting! Just to get the same sort of tool markings.
Yeah, exactly. So when you look at it, hopefully you don't think it's been done by two separate artists.
No,
and the other challenge for us, which actually we put a lot of thought into, of course, and used various mock-ups and drawings beforehand, but it wasn't actually until the final installation when we had the bronzes, hovering with the cranes on site, that we set the exact relationship between them, but for both of us, it was the first time we had used two bronzes, and therefore setting them in relation to each other.
So were you saying the rider and the horse were actually
That's
cast
one
separate?
bronze. That's
Right.
one bronze, and then there was a separate figure of the paratrooper. And what we did,
right.
So the Pegasus is up on a plinth, as in up in the sky, and actually it's gloriously silhouetted against a sky. And then on essentially what is ground level, and you can walk around him, is the paratrooper, which is the we wanted him to be very much down to earth, and so we had the separation of sort of the real world of the figure of the paratrooper, and then the mythological representation of Pegasus was then put up in space, sort of above and behind him. But
Right.
the exact relation of how you compose two bronzes is the first time that we'd had that challenge.
Right. Okay. And I should have mentioned that before. That it's actually a 3-figure monument. You've got the Pegasus, you've got the rider Bellerophon, and then you have the paratrooper, which is a physically separate
Absolutely.
sculpture within the monument.
Exactly.
And the paratrooper is in the pose of a paratrooper just having landed and sort of gathering up his chute. Right?
Absolutely.
Is that
well,
right?
I mean, we looked at the parachute, but actually I had forgotten. Funny enough, Charlie and I went up early days, and we actually went and watched a training jump, just to sort of, certainly remind myself and show Charlie, what the actual sort of the process was and the actions. But I had forgotten quite how large a parachute was. And we actually brought a parachute back with us. I've still got it in the studio here. And we played it out. So when I had the clay of the paratrooper on the go, I then played out the parachute within the studio, and it was huge. And there was definitely an aesthetic problem there.
You mean in terms of sculpting an entire parachute?
Well, yeah. I mean, it would have almost. It was a big, slightly amorphous lump. I mean, there's not much you can do with it.
Yeah,
and
it
they're
kind of
so
would've-
large. I mean, so the idea of puffing it up with a bit of wind or something, it would have dominated the other bronzes so completely. And that allied to a visit we had from some veterans from the Second World War who came and saw the clays and process in the studio. It was a slight education for me, showed me up as a peacetime soldier. But one of the old boys who had jumped at Normandy said, as soon as they hit the ground, you didn't bugger about the parachute tour, just got rid of that, got your kit, and got ready. So actually, to give it a more operational edge, rather than a training jump, you would only pull in your parachute, therefore, on a training jump. And that was a sort of decided, the aesthetics of actually trying to make it work, and then actually presenting it as an operational jump rather than a training jump meant the parachute went. And so what he's actually doing is dragging in this container of equipment. So when you jump in with everything you need to live and fight in a rucksack, and that's what he's pulling in.
Oh, fantastic. So let me go back to this idea that when you were working together on separate parts of the monument, you were trading tools. For instance, Charlie, did you work on the figures at all? And Jacko, did you work on the figure of the horse at all?
What we did actually was because of the way, I mean, I'd sculpted Pegasus first, and because of the way the wings were angled, and that had to be carefully considered because you couldn't have them too low because of the weight of the bronze and the amount of wind it would catch. So that was all engineered to be sort of the optimal V shape from the front. If you're looking at it from the front, that would have really restricted Jacko's sculpting of Bellerophon. So sculpted Pegasus first, and then we actually moulded the rib cage basically in the top of the wings, and then a resin was made of that, and Jacko actually sculpted Bellerophon just on the rib cage of Pegasus.
Sort of a resin mock-up of the rib cage
exactly.
of the horse.
Then occasionally,
So you didn't actually have to put the...
Yeah, and then what
Yeah.
I'd do actually, if I put that the resin, it's like a sort of bucking bronco rodeo. You can imagine,
mechanical
with the
horse.
clay of Bellerophon. If I put it up against the wall of the studio, I could then project the image of Pegasus, the clay Pegasus, so I would see the complete design of Pegasus and Bellerophon. Even though I only had a section of the torso of Pegasus, I could see it as a complete design. And so things like the relation of Bellerophon's feet to the forward hooves of Pegasus, which actually worked. One of those things worked really well in the end.
Really well,
We could actually, although Pegasus wasn't there, he had gone. He was being already worked on at the foundry. I could see the whole design together.
Wow, so the horse went to the foundry. Pegasus went to the foundry while you were still modeling the
Yeah. There was so much engineering work that needed to be done inside the bronze that it had to be done first.
It took nearly a year,
there.
didn't it?
Yeah, it took
What, just the interior structure of the horse took nearly a year?
Yeah, it's like a sort of Formula One car on the inside, and had to make the legs, the cannon bones at the back, especially wide to fit stainless steel structure, which was, specially engineered to fit inside it.
So there's basically like a stainless steel skeleton inside the horse that supports the weight of the bronze itself.
Yeah.
So we had to engineer it, especially because it was. I mean, you have the wings, which obviously have the purpose of flight, but we had to make sure that Pegasus wasn't going to take off.
Right.
So actually, a structural engineer had to get his calculator out, and I think actually in terms of sort of minimum best practice, the requirement was to engineer it for a 50-year wind. As in the sort of wind that only comes around every 50 years, but we ended up actually engineering it for a 100-year wind. So fingers crossed, whatever wind comes, it'll be okay.
Wow. Now, I back to this question though of maintaining sort of a unity between the two works, between the two hands of two sculptors in the work. Jacko, did you actually model any part of the Pegasus itself? And Charlie, did you work on the figure? And just in order to sort of blend your two handwritings?
No, we didn't. I mean, there was initial, in terms of the sort of division of labour, it seemed to start with only fair that I helped Charlie with the wings of Pegasus. They were large in terms of sort of mass. They were almost as much as the horse. And obviously, I didn't feel any confidence in helping Charlie with the horse. He's the subject matter expert in that. But actually, when it came to the wings, I think for a couple of days I sort of helped. But actually, Charlie then very much had an idea of how he was going to sculpt, and actually the handling the clay, and actually ended up doing all of it pretty much. But so rather than actually having four hands on the same bit of clay, the actual unity of the piece more came from actually the fact that we were not only sharing a space, but we were also sharing accommodation at the time. So we were living in the same bungalow nearby, and that meant, we didn't have to sort of specify meetings as such to check the design as we were going through. We were living it the whole time, as in, it might be a conversation over breakfast or over having some food in the evening. So we were sort of living it together. We were so in tune.
Right.
There was actually at no point any conflict in terms of the design, and the conversations happened very naturally. It wasn't as if we were two agencies that had to consciously meet. We were literally living together, working in the same space.
So you were sharing a studio before you actually went for this commission?
No.
Is that right?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, it was this commission that led to us sharing the same space for that commission.
And it's successful enough, the partnership, that you continue to do so. You have
we have sister studios now, so we have our own after that commission.
In the same sort of larger structure, though.
Yeah,
right. Yeah. I mean, you have a shared kitchen between them, basically. Sure. Yeah, it's fantastic. Beautiful spaces as well. Tell me a bit about how the work was received, because this is the kind of sculpture that isn't done often. In fact, it will be done exactly once for the paratroopers, I imagine. This is the paratroopers memorial. It was done for their 70th anniversary. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. And so obviously it's a big thing, and this represents a branch of the armed forces for the entire nation. What was the ceremony like? I mean, how was it received by the public? Did you get a lot of press for it? What was it like?
It was a horrible day, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it was pouring with rain.
But that's the only way in which it was horrible, I imagine.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was an amazing day. It really was incredible. And it was such an honour to be asked to do it in the first place, and lovely for Jacko to have the connection. But for me to sort of be involved with it was just absolutely amazing. And
let me just stop you right there. In terms of Jacko having a connection, you're talking about Jacko's past service in the military.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
I should mention that. Yeah, Jacko, you yourself were a paratrooper. You were a major, correct?
Left as a major. Yeah.
You left as a major, right? Yeah, but you were in the military for several years, like 8 years.
Yeah, 9.
9 years.
9 before Florence.
And you were a paratrooper.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
But actually, in terms of the feedback, it also is a site that's open to the public, but it's not in a public space, as it were. As in, you have to visit this site. But actually, the most important and certainly most moving feedback was actually from some mothers of young paratroopers who had recently fallen in recent conflicts. And it's wonderful working on a piece like that where it becomes bigger certainly than you as the artist or itself as a piece of art. It has greater meaning in that. So that, I mean, in terms of feedback, that was it. And a few kind words from those sort of people who, that's the purpose of memorials is for the families and friends of the guys who actually lost their lives. And if it struck a chord with them, then that was how we felt we'd achieved success with it.
It's I've seen pictures basically of the event, and it's amazing. Prince Charles is there. Yeah. There's a fantastic photo of the three of you actually. You're all sort of gesturing up, and it's the picture is taken from sort of a low angle, and it makes all three of you look very majestic and important and powerful. And you're in your trench coats in the rain, and it's just a fantastic shot.
Suits and wellies.
Actually, Jacko, can I ask you about a story you told me earlier today? Or
but yeah,
rather not talk about that?
No, it's fine. It's fine. But no, it was amusing as we talked about earlier today on the way back from the British Museum. I did let on. I said, on the unveiling, it was quite a big piece. So we actually moved as a sort of party up to the bronzes, and we're walking around and talking, and surrounded by a throng of very wet veterans. And but they couldn't hear our words, so there was a lot just gesticulating up at the bronzes, and I assume everyone's assumption was that we were talking about them. But I let Prince Charles, who was there because he's the Colonel in Chief of the Parachute Regiment, Airborne Forces. I let him on to the little secret that I'd actually slyly given Bellerophon my tattoo. And so we started talking about tattoos. We ended up actually talking about tattoos and women with tattoos, and actually having quite a irreverent discussion and laughing a lot. So yeah, it's fun.
Funny.
Yeah, with Prince Charles.
Yeah,
that's great. That's nice. If I can sort of switch gears a little bit, is there any sort of when you did your research in terms of how this should be, when you're first putting sort of the idea together, did you look at historical precedent or perhaps other examples of similar work? And I can't think of another Pegasus statue. Actually, is there? Did you find any sort of freestanding? I'm sure there's plenty of sort of relief sculptures of Pegasus.
Not on that scale. What was the maquette? Who had done that? I can't remember now.
I can't remember. Who was that?
Oh,
there was an existing maquette size which had been done in the Second World War sort of time.
Yeah, I can actually think of two that were done in the late 19th century. Actually, one was by I think Carrier-Belleuse.
Okay.
Did one? No, Louis Anton Barry.
Okay.
Louis Anton Barry.
Well, I'm not sure we found that one.
He's the animalier,
Sure.
He it's not Pegasus and Bellerophon, but it is a winged horse. It's like Griffin, basically.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
With a mythical thing. That's close. But no, then there's one perhaps by, I want to say Alfred Gilbert, actually.
Okay.
Which would have been 1890, or 1890s or so. Maybe even 1990s.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't... Yeah. Charlie obviously put more time and effort into researching Pegasus himself, but, we certainly... Charlie got hold of some real birds' wings of various selection to look at, the feathers and things to inform him sculpting that. But, we had this silhouette which Pegasus had to conform to.
Right. You were locked into the composition.
Yeah.
I guess so.
That much freedom with it, really.
No.
I mean, I went and looked at lots of birds of prey and tried to sort of figure out what would theoretically, or
if a horse had wings,
yeah.
what kind of wings would it have?
How could it possibly work?
What did you? Is there a particular sort of bird of prey that you settled upon?
I went for a bald eagle, actually. Yeah, that seemed to have the nicest sort of spread of the wing, and I thought that would sort of. But then again, I was quite governed by the engineer because, you couldn't have it too wide, obviously, because that would catch more wind. So you had to kind of narrow it down a bit. But the importance of it for me was from the side. It had to, the height of it had to be seriously impressive. It had to have.
What is the total height of the monument?
God, I can't remember now.
I can't remember now.
It's about 4.5 meters.
The bronze was.
The bronze was, yeah.
And then that's atop a 2 meter plinth on top a 2-3 meter mound.
Yeah.
Wow.
So from ground level, it's nearly 10 meters. Because we were quite keen to create in the context of it. So there's quite a lot of space around it, and there's actually a long ramp which sweeps up,
right,
to make the gradient,
and that's what
to meet the level of the paratrooper.
Right.
So actually, there's a lot of space. So it's not dominant in terms of imposing, but it's certainly spectacular.
Yeah, it is because I mean, the best thing about it is the profile, which of course I guess is locked in because of the shape of the badge, the design of the badge, which of course is designed as a 2-dimensional image and it has a very striking profile, and it's great to see it so legible and so recognizable from the badge in 3 dimensions.
Yeah,
as well.
Actually chosen by Daphne du Maurier.
Really?
Yeah, she was married to General Boy Browning, who was the first commander of Airborne forces.
Daphne du Maurier was.
Daphne du Maurier. Yeah, she then ran off and I think spent the rest of her life with another lady in Paris. I can't remember her name, but yeah, they were married.
Right, and I know her name. Why?
She's an author.
Right. Okay.
French Lieutenant's Woman, I think. Did she write that one? I can't remember. Anyway.
Okay. All right. I'll edit that out. The
Yeah.
part where I say I don't know something. I think it's a really remarkable thing. It's not the kind of commission that every sculptor gets to do in their career, and for the both of you to start your careers basically with something like this is just an absolutely phenomenal opportunity. Thanks for sharing with everyone else, because I'm sure everyone at home is salivating over your good fortune and your success on this thing. It's just fantastic work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening, and special thanks to Charlie Langton and Mark Jackson for their participation. They were my first interviews, and they were very patient with me. Don't forget you can check out Charlie's work at www.charlielangtonart.com, and if you want to hear more from the sculptor Mark Jackson, I've got a solo interview I recorded with him that will be airing in a few weeks. Until then, don't forget to check out the website, thesculptorsfuneral.com, for the entire archives of the podcast, and join in the conversation on the Facebook group page for The Sculptor's Funeral. I hope you have a productive week. I'll be back soon with more.